The Empress Decoded, Carl Jung and the Hidden Power of the Divine Feminine. The Empress doesn't walk into a room, she arrives. Draped in abundance, crowned by stars, and seated upon the very fabric of the earth's fertility, she radiates the essence of the Divine Feminine. Her throne is not merely a seat, it's a declaration that spirit and matter are not enemies, but lovers in sacred union. At her feet, nature blossoms. Above her, the golden orb with the cross, a symbol of sovereignty not over others, but over her own inner cosmos. Even the golden eagle, perched subtly or soaring overhead, whispers of vision, power, and maternal clarity. She carries the sacred triangle within her, not as decoration, but as destiny. This is not geometry for mathematicians, it's geometry for magicians. The triangle, the number 3, the Trinity, they all converge in her. Where the magician says, I will, and the high priestess says, I know, the Empress smiles and says, I become. Her realm is lush not just in wheat and water, but in psychic energy and the alchemical dance between womb and word, dream and deed. To create is her nature, but her creation is never just physical. It's emotional, intuitive, transformational. Let's get real. You've already met the Empress. She's that moment when an idea becomes a painting, when a longing turns into a garden, when a conversation births a breakthrough. She's that flash of feminine inspiration when logic hits a dead end. If you've ever felt intuition pulling you toward a decision that logic couldn't explain, that was her, whispering through the unconscious. Want to connect more with this force? Try creative journaling, nature walks, or even cooking intuitively without a recipe. Trust that inner nudge. Her surroundings tell the story as much as her body. The forest behind her is not just decoration, it's a portal. The water isn't just symbolic, it's alive with emotional flow. The crown of stars isn't ornamental, it's a map of higher consciousness. And all of this is in service to one thing, the birth of something that never existed before. She is the bridge between mystery and manifestation. Not passive like a dreamer, but not forceful like a commander. Her power is seductive, receptive, and irresistible. But don't mistake softness for fragility. Her seduction can shake kingdoms. The same feminine power that nurtures life can unravel empires if misused or misunderstood. She's not just a Madonna. She's also the Mad Queen when disconnected from her source. She's not just your mother. She's Mother Nature herself, creative, chaotic, wise, and wildly unpredictable. And just when you think you've figured her out, she introduces you to her sister. Relationship with other archetypes. The Empress doesn't stand alone. She exists in a royal and cosmic triangle, a living geometry of balance and contrast. On one side stands the High Priestess, veiled in silence and mystery, guarding the feminine mysteries from behind the curtain. On the other, the Emperor, seated in stone, ruling over form and logic. The Empress? She flows between them. She expresses what the High Priestess contains. She breathes spirit into the Emperor's law. Together, they reflect a trinity where the sacred feminine is both womb and voice, and the masculine finds purpose in her creation. The High Priestess whispers in dreams, the Empress sings in life. While the priestess meditates on symbols, the Empress embodies them. Think of them like moon and earth, both feminine, yet one hidden in shadow and the other bathed in sunlight. The Empress externalizes the inner wisdom of the High Priestess, making it tactile. This is why the feminine archetype must not be reduced to passivity. Feminine energy acts, not by force, but by fertilizing what is unseen until it blooms into form. She doesn't just wait, she gestates, nourishes, and births. When the Emperor enters the scene, it's not to dominate her, but to complete the pattern. In a well-balanced psyche, The Empress inspires while the Emperor builds. She dreams in colors, he draws the map. She is the sacred chaos of intuition, he the structured order of manifestation. One without the other leads to imbalance. A world ruled only by emperors becomes rigid, patriarchal, disconnected from life. A world ruled only by empresses risks drowning in emotion without direction. True cosmic balance is found when both dance together, like yin and yang flowing in mutual respect. Historically, this triadic tension played out in myth and art. Think of Isis and Osiris, or even Mary and Joseph, where the sacred feminine and masculine were not in competition but co-creation. In Jungian psychology, the Empress can be seen as the anima fully integrated, no longer hidden in shadow, but walking beside the animus in conscious harmony. And in relationships, we see this dance too. When a person nurtures a partner's vision while remaining rooted in their own intuitive knowing, that's the Empress and Emperor building a new kingdom together. But what happens when the Empress is misunderstood? When her softness is mistaken for weakness, or her sensuality for manipulation? And what of the High Priestess when the world forgets her? The next chapter dives into those ancient feminine mysteries, the ones buried under centuries of dust and dogma, still pulsing with power just beneath the surface. Feminine mysteries and creative power. The Empress isn't just an icon of beauty and abundance. She is the channel through which the invisible becomes flesh, the voice that speaks for spirit in the language of matter. She embodies the four great feminine mysteries: formation, preservation, nourishment, and transformation. These aren't poetic flourishes, they're blueprints for life. When you create a garden, build a business, raise a child, or even nurture an idea until it breathes, you're moving through these mysteries step by step under her guidance. She is the womb of the world, and her pulse beats in every act of becoming. While the High Priestess safeguards inner truth, the Empress walks it into the world. She doesn't sit in a temple, she is the temple. Everything she touches gains weight and meaning. Her magic? Making the abstract tangible. In this way, she teaches that the sacred isn't something far away. It's here in clay, bread, bodies, fabric, and form. She reminds us that spiritual rebirth doesn't happen in clouds. It happens in kitchens, studios, gardens, and quiet, messy moments. Want to live more like her? Start by paying attention to what you birth into your reality, consciously or not. She also protects the mystery of nourishment, not just physical, but psychic and emotional. A look that heals, a meal that holds memory, a word that waters a dry soul. All of this falls under her domain. To create with her is to infuse intention into every detail. The Empress archetype invites us to slow down, to let intuition guide the hand, to recognize that the process is part of the offering. Artists, healers, mothers, lovers all drink from her chalice, knowingly or not. And if you're struggling to access this energy, try meditation focused on your solar plexus and sacral chakras. They're her gateway. But her final mystery, transformation, is where the real alchemy begins. Because she doesn't just preserve what is, she alters it. Compost becomes soil. Sorrow becomes poetry. Love becomes life. She's the furnace of the soul, where spirit and matter melt and merge into new forms. And through her, even trauma can be rebirthed into wisdom. It's not easy, but it's sacred work. She doesn't promise comfort, she offers meaning. And meaning, once touched, opens the door to symbols, symbols that speak louder than words. Symbols that show us the blueprint of how creation works across all cultures and times. And that's where we're headed next. Numerological and geometrical insights. 3 is not just a number, it's a spell. In the realm of the Empress, it's the breath after the inhale and exhale. It's the moment when duality gives birth to something new. In sacred geometry, the triangle is the first true shape, the minimal structure required to create form. And so the Empress, as the third card in the major arcana, becomes the living expression of this principle. She is the resolution of opposites, the child of heaven and earth, the sacred third that unites spirit and matter in a dynamic and creative dance. Pythagoras taught that 3 was the number of harmony, the point at which polarity synthesizes into a higher unity. Look at the triangle again, not static but stable. The Empress wears it not on her dress, but in her being. She is what happens when masculine and feminine energies merge, not to cancel each other out, but to give rise to a new frequency. Think of 2 parents and a child, or an idea followed by effort and finally a creation. She lives in this process. The golden orb and the cross of Venus echo this union, circle and cross, infinite and grounded, spirit and form. It's not just metaphysics, it's biology, psychology, and daily life. In every meaningful decision, there's a triadic structure, the known, the unknown, and the synthesis that moves you forward. The Empress thrives in this synthesis. Want to feel her presence? Try using triangle-based visualizations in meditation, especially around your heart space, or explore mandalas with threefold symmetry. These are not just designs, they're maps to activate psychic energy and align with feminine intuition. Across cultures, trinities are sacred: Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. Maiden Mother, Crone. Each trinity carries the imprint of life's unfolding, and in the tarot, the Empress brings that truth to life. She reminds us that creation doesn't happen from isolation, it's born through connection. She invites us to honor not just beginnings and endings, but the sacred middle, where transformation happens. That's where she lives, in the moment something becomes something else. And when that something else begins to take form in culture, art, and myth, it's no longer just energy, it becomes image. And that's where the visual history of the Empress starts to tell its own story. Artistic and mythological depictions. The Empress is no stranger to art. She is its mother, its muse, its whisper in the sculptor's ear. Throughout history, her essence has appeared in forms that transcend time. In medieval iconography, she unfolds like the Vierge of Rant, a wooden statue of the Madonna opening her own body to reveal a divine interior. This isn't just religious art, it's an invitation to see the sacred feminine as a vessel of both mystery and revelation. Her body becomes a cathedral, her womb the chamber of secrets, her gesture a cosmic unveiling. Fast forward to the modern era, and you'll find her in the surreal works of William Blake, the archetypal visions of Waite's Tarot, the sensual shapes of Henry Moore, and the mythic photography of Adolphe Braun. She's not static, she evolves with our collective psyche. Each artist who channels her does so through a different facet, sometimes nurturing, sometimes wild, sometimes veiled in mysticism. The feminine archetype is never a one-note character. It's a prism of light bending through culture, symbol, and soul. And in each depiction, the Empress reminds us of her dual nature. She can be Isis, cradling Horus, or Ceres, mourning Persephone, or Venus, rising from the foam in all her radiant seduction. But she is also Kali, necklace of skulls, tongue out, dancing on the bones of illusions. That's the paradox we must hold. The Empress is not always gentle. Sometimes she destroys what's stagnant to make space for something truer. To recognize her only in the soft light is to miss her fire. And yet, it is that very fire that lights the path for transformation. These mythological and artistic embodiments serve a deeper function. They mirror our inner landscape. When you see a statue of Venus or a painting of Mary, ask yourself, What part of me is being reflected here? The part that wants to love, to nourish, to seduce, or perhaps the part that longs to destroy in order to recreate? The Empress offers not just imagery but initiation. She invites you into a relationship with your own feminine mysteries, whether you're male or female, artist or observer. And through that relationship, the unconscious begins to stir. Images turn to dreams, dreams turn to symbols, and symbols start whispering truths you didn't know you carried. And that, my friend, is where psychology meets the sacred, where Jung's voice begins to echo through the corridors of the Empress's palace. Jungian and psychological interpretations. Carl Jung didn't just explore the psyche, he danced with its shadows and symbols. And when it comes to the Empress, he saw more than a tarot card or mythic figure. He saw a portal. In her, spirit reconnects with body, thought bows to feeling, and the unconscious surges into the conscious like a wave over dry land. She doesn't live in the intellect. She lives in the dream, the gut, the ache in the chest that says there's more. She bridges worlds, reminding us that true transformation doesn't come from reading. It comes from feeling, embodying, surrendering. In Jungian terms, the Empress emerges as a dynamic expression of the anima, the feminine soul within the masculine psyche. But she's not just a soft whisper, she's a force. When neglected, she becomes the femme fatale, or the terrible mother, manipulating or devouring. But when integrated, she becomes the femme inspiratrix, igniting vision, healing wounds, birthing beauty. Jung knew this wasn't metaphor, it was medicine. He urged his patients to engage with these inner figures through active imagination, to draw them, speak with them, even argue with them, because that's how psychic energy moves. The Empress also stands at the threshold of active imagination, one of Jung's greatest tools. In that liminal space, you don't just analyze your emotions, you meet them. You paint your fear. You write letters to your longing. You sit with an image that appeared in your dream and ask it why it came. Want to try it? Next time you feel stuck, grab a notebook, close your eyes, and ask, what does my feminine want me to know? Then write. Don't censor. Let her speak. That's how the Empress makes her way into your life, not with logic, but with presence. This archetype is also deeply linked to emotional intelligence. She doesn't separate thought from feeling, she integrates them. Her wisdom is not linear but cyclical. She teaches that everything in the psyche must be honored. The grief that won't leave, the intuition you keep dismissing, the joy you feel guilty for. These aren't distractions, they're gateways. Through her, we learn to be whole. And in a world that worships intellect and represses the body, the Empress brings the radical message that your feelings are sacred text. And that message didn't stay trapped in theory. It echoed in the lives of women who refused to be boxed in. Women who lived the Empress archetype not as an idea, but as a fierce, flawed, and luminous reality. Some wore crowns. Some wore paint. Some changed history. Feminine influence in history and culture. The Empress walks not only through myth and dream, but down the corridors of history, wearing crowns, corsets, and sometimes scandal. Think of Queen Elizabeth, unmarried, unshakable, and unmistakably sovereign. She ruled with the Empress's paradox, maternal to a nation, yet ruthless when needed. She didn't shrink to fit a world designed for men, she expanded it. Her image, draped in pearls and symbolism, became more than fashion, it was armor made of archetype. She was the Madonna and the sword in one breath. Then there's Peggy Guggenheim, another incarnation of the Empress, but this time in the electric world of art. She didn't just support creativity, she midwifed it. With her patronage, rebellious artists found voice. She understood that to nurture is not to coddle, but to challenge, to push, to believe when no one else does. That's Empress energy in action, creating space where something wild, beautiful, and necessary can emerge. She didn't wear a crown, but her gaze could anoint. She mothered visionaries. These women, in their own ways, carried both the divine and shadow aspects of the feminine. The Empress archetype doesn't promise purity, it demands wholeness. With it comes complexity, contradiction, power, and vulnerability. When misaligned, she may become the mad queen, manipulative, erratic, consumed by image or isolation. But when rooted in inner truth, she channels the Great Mother, a force of creative inspiration and fierce love that transforms everything she touches. It's a razor's edge, and history is full of women who've walked it. Cultural movements often reflect this archetypal dance. When feminine power rises in art, politics, or science, it's not a trend, it's an echo of something ancient and returning. Whether in a leader's compassion, a poet's fire, or a mother's unwavering intuition, the Empress reveals herself. Her voice may not always be loud, but it is unmistakably felt. And today, in a world still healing from patriarchal repression, her presence feels like a prophecy reborn. But every prophecy has its challenge, and not every rise in feminine power stays true to her essence. What happens when liberation confuses itself with domination? When the Empress archetype is distorted in the name of freedom? That question takes us to a deeper, more controversial chapter. Dual nature of the Empress. The Empress is not just the gentle gardener of souls, she's also the storm that clears the field. Her nature is dual, and that's not a flaw, it's her power. She gives, but she can also take. In the archetypal realm, the Great Mother wears many faces. On one side, she is nurturing, generous, an ocean of love and fertile imagination. On the other, she can be smothering, chaotic, even cruel if her energy is denied or repressed. This is where many misunderstand the Empress. She is not all light. She is the full cycle of creation, death, and rebirth. Jung saw this clearly. The unconscious, when ignored, doesn't fade away, it fights back. When the Empress is cut off from her divine wisdom, she devolves into domination, vanity, emotional tyranny. Think of fairy tale queens turned wicked, or historical figures consumed by their own legend. That's not fiction, it's the shadow feminine at play. And she doesn't just appear in women. She shows up in men too, when the anima is unintegrated, turning love into control, or creativity into obsession. The Empress, misaligned, becomes a mirror of unmet needs and unresolved wounds. Yet this shadow is not evil, it's invitation. It says, come deeper. Face me. Heal. When you feel that urge to manipulate, or when nurturing turns to rescuing, or love becomes possession, that's a moment to pause. To ask, am I channeling the Empress or controlling her image? True feminine power doesn't clutch, it flows. And reclaiming this flow requires courage. Practices like shadow journaling, embodiment work, and sacred rage release can help transmute this destructive edge into something sacred, real, and liberating. We see this archetype play out not only in individuals, but in societies. A culture that idolizes beauty but fears aging, that worships fertility but shames motherhood, that commodifies emotion but silences depth, that's a culture locked in the distorted Empress. And healing this means reconnecting to her roots, not as a symbol of perfection, but as a being of cycles. Nature doesn't apologize for winter. The Empress teaches us, neither should we. But this teaching has been misused too. In the rush for empowerment, some have confused domination with liberation. The next chapter asks a vital question. Are we truly honoring the sacred feminine, or are we just mimicking the same patterns of power with a new face? Feminine liberation and misinterpretation. Feminine liberation was never about trading one crown for another. It was about reclaiming something ancient, wild, and sacred. But somewhere along the way, parts of this liberation drifted from essence and leaned into imitation. When the Empress archetype is distorted, she stops birthing new realities and starts replicating the same hierarchies she was meant to transmute. Power, when pursued as an end in itself, turns sterile. And so what was meant to be a revolution of soul becomes a chase for status, applause, and validation from systems never built to honor her. We see this misalignment everywhere, in the pressure to perform empowerment instead of live it, in the way vulnerability gets framed as weakness or softness as naivety. The divine feminine doesn't need to mimic masculine assertiveness to be taken seriously. She speaks with the voice of intuition, presence, and prophetic depth. But when she abandons her spiritual roots to fit modern molds, she becomes fragmented. Feminine archetypes turn flat. The Empress becomes more brand than being, more image than essence. This is not liberation. It's colonization of the inner world. True feminine freedom is messy, cyclical, and deeply embodied. It includes blood and tears, silence and rage, ecstasy and decay. It doesn't shout over others to be heard. It speaks in symbols, dreams, and sensations. The Empress archetype reminds us that real power is generative. It creates life, art, insight. It heals, and it often moves in the opposite direction of social trends. Want to reclaim this? Ditch the hustle culture for a day. Turn your phone off. Light a candle, journal without filters, let your body move without choreography. That's the Empress knocking. There's a danger in rejecting masculine oppression by becoming a distorted masculine mirror. In doing so, the sacred feminine forgets she has her own tempo, logic, and language. She was never meant to conquer. She was born to co-create. Jung warned of this shadow. When anima becomes unconscious, her energy can turn manipulative, chaotic, or disembodied. But when honored, she awakens dormant creativity, radical empathy, and fierce compassion. Feminine liberation isn't about power over others. It's about power rooted in the fertile soil of self-awareness and divine union. Yet this union begins within. Before the Empress can reshape the world, she must rise as a psychic force inside us. Not a role model to imitate, but an archetype to integrate. And once she moves in your inner world, through dreams, instincts, creativity, she starts transforming everything in her path. And that's where her mystery deepens even more, as an inner presence guiding not just what we do, but who we dare to become. The Empress as inner psychological force. The Empress isn't just a card you draw or a figure you admire. She's a force living inside you. She shows up when your soul itches to create, when your body yearns for rest, when your heart knows something before your mind can catch up. In both men and women, she pulses beneath the surface as an intuitive guide, a whisper in the unconscious saying, "There is more." She is the sacred rhythm behind your instinct to nurture, to birth, to protect. When ignored, she grows quiet, but when welcomed, she becomes a life-changing presence. She wears many faces in the psyche: lover, muse, queen, seductress, mother, healer. Each one is a mirror of your inner world. Sometimes she appears in dreams, offering comfort or challenge. Sometimes in waking life, through synchronicities, longings, or even creative surges that seem to come out of nowhere. These are not random. They are her language. She speaks through color, sound, feeling, intuition. The more you attune to this frequency, the more whole you begin to feel, not fragmented by roles, but reunited in essence. Carl Jung taught us that real transformation comes through integration, not analysis alone. The Empress can't be understood purely by intellect. She must be felt, embodied, lived. Want to activate her in your life? Try active imagination. Sit quietly, visualize her, and ask what she wants to show you. Or create something, paint, dance, write, without judging the outcome. Let your body and soul collaborate. She thrives in those spaces where control fades and presence takes over. This is how psychic energy moves from potential into form. The Empress inside you also holds the power of healing. She invites you to soften where you've hardened, to listen where you've dismissed, to trust what you were taught to doubt. Her path is not linear, it spirals inward. Every emotional wound, creative block, or moment of apathy can be traced back to a place where she's been suppressed. And so her return isn't always comfortable. It shakes, stirs, dissolves. But in doing so, she makes space for something more true to emerge. Something whole, something real. And that's the beauty of her mystery. She doesn't live outside of you, waiting to be discovered. She lives within, waiting to be remembered. And once she's awakened, the world around you begins to shift. Symbols speak louder, instincts grow sharper, life feels richer. And just as the Empress births creation into the visible world, she also births a deeper awareness in you, one that will lead you, if you let it, to the next sacred revelation.